It's time to look
Rearview
forward
mirror.
to Nashville. And with
Yes.
that, this is the perfect time to bring in our good friend and
Hey
announcer,
guys,
Jake Zivin.
what's up?
What's
Hey,
going on, Jake?
Have you talked it all out? The loss last night. Have you
I
gotten it
think we
all out?
it's a
have.
therapy session.
Therapy. Yeah, it felt like that the first 25
Yeah.
minutes, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was rough. It was rough.
Man, it's an Open Cup. Atlanta will be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully. We hope so.
Yeah. It's a tough one to swallow, I think. I think that's where a lot of the fan base is struggling. But at the end of the day, that's what the Open Cup is all about, right? You're going to have games like that, and that's why it's so much fun to watch. It's just maybe a little less fun when it's your team.
Of course. Yeah, look, they happen. When a team rotates, we talked to Gonzalo Pineda today for our broadcast meeting ahead of this game, and what he said is, like, I rotated 10 guys. We're playing a team that plays together, right, that is used to playing together. That's their first team. He, as you guys mentioned, he kind of put some self-reflection of the blame on himself, saying, like, did I rotate too many? But look, I think at this stage of the Open Cup, that's what you do when you're an MLS team, playing a midweek game against a USL Championship team. You rotate, you give guys a chance to play, and you hope you get a win. And obviously it didn't happen for Atlanta, which is the beauty of the Cup, as you said, right? It may be better for everybody else. Tough for Atlanta, but it's, to me, I don't see it as a result that's going to have much of an effect going forward in MLS for Atlanta.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It be what it be, right? Like, that's just how you got to look at it. So
Exactly.
Jake, we appreciate you coming on. This is obviously first time coming on. So just, I'm sure most everybody knows you, and we have this new great broadcasting crew on Apple TV. But if you can, just kind of let everybody know who you are, what you do, where you came from, all that good stuff.
Yeah, great to be on. Great to see you guys. Great to chat. So I'm now paired with Taylor Twellman on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV. Taylor and I will be calling the game from Nashville, which has been great. We called the Atlanta-Charlotte game earlier, so this will be our second time seeing Atlanta United. For the past 8 seasons, I was the local television voice of the Portland Timbers. I was the Kevin Egan of the Portland Timbers, as it is, and throughout that time, got a good amount of games with ESPN and with Fox as well over the past 5 years, and now here we are. So, born and raised in Evanston, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. Been in Portland and Oregon now for over a decade, and crisscrossing the country on a weekly basis right now to wherever game we're at. It's been a blast. It's been a thrill for 2 months, and excited to continue to go. Excited to get to Atlanta, which we certainly will this year, and get to Mercedes-Benz. I've been once before. It was a wonderful day for all of you. 2018 MLS Cup. I called the game on the radio for the Timbers. Man, I was blown away, right? And I try to approach my job, even when calling Timbers games, from a relatively neutral perspective. So obviously, you're rooting for fun moments and all that. But for me, my main takeaway was what an atmosphere, what a stadium, what an event that was. It felt as big as any sports event that I'd ever been to and covered, which, includes multiple college football national championship games, right? It felt like that in a really good way. And great night for you guys, for Atlanta, and a special day. So I'm excited to get back, though, to the Benz, because it's been 5 years.
Yeah, you're actually our second Timbers-related guest we've ever had. We had Ryan Clark on from the Oregonian a few weeks ago. I'm sure you know him very well. But yeah, he has similar things to say about Mercedes-Benz. He wasn't there for a match, but he was there, I believe, for the Georgia game against – I guess
probably the Ducks, right?
Yeah, the Ducks, exactly.
And they smashed the Ducks, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Dan Lanning's first head coaching game was against Georgia, and
that's
I bet
right.
he was wishing he was back at Georgia after that game. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. He did all right, though. So my time before I was with the Timbers, I was in Eugene, Oregon as a sports anchor for the local news station there during the glory years, the Chip Kelly years. Yeah. Covered no longer your boy, Marcus Mariota, when he was in college, but a big fan of Marcus. And I was hoping that he would have had a better season last year in Atlanta, but alas.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, how's it been going? I mean, you mentioned you've been at it for a couple of months. You're doing the Timbers games up there in the Pacific Northwest. But how have things been going with MLS Season Pass, working with Taylor, who obviously is a big name in the media world, has a very...
So he doesn't need to hear that. He doesn't need to hear that anymore. Don't worry.
No, but obviously he has a long broadcasting career, very successful career as a player.
Yes.
So, how's that been working with him? And again, how's the MLS season pass been as a whole?
It's been great. It's a dream for me. I grew up in Evanston as a diehard Chicago Fire fan. I'm, of the age that grew up with this league. I was a kid when the league started, a kid when the Fire came into the league in '98. For me, they were on the same level as the Bears and the Cubs and the Bulls as I was growing up, a soccer player and a soccer fan. And that kind of love extended to the league as a whole as I got older. I interned for Major League Soccer when I was in college. I worked as the the clock and score operator for the MLS Game of the Week in 2005 and 2006 in the production truck for ESPN2 when I was, I'll date myself, when I was 20 and 21, when I was in college. So like that experience brought me to, I think, really being more focused on not just the Fire, but the health of Major League Soccer and loving this league and wanting it to grow. And I've kept that. I always kept that and felt that, even through kind of a 7 or 8 year break going into local news as a sports anchor reporter, which was kind of the way to get an entry-level job as a sports broadcaster back then. This sort of stuff didn't exist back then. So you couldn't really carve out your own thing about soccer in the mid to late 2000s. So I always kept that love of MLS, always wanted to get back into it. Worked out to be able to do so with the Timbers for the past 8 years. And then when this came around, for me, it's just a dream to go to a different game every week. And we've been fortunate to be at kind of one of the marquee matchups of the week every week. Right. And to work with Taylor, who, I joked about, kind of feeding his ego, but he's been the face of ESPN soccer for a reason for the past decade. Right. First of all, he's a great guy. I've loved being with him, but from a working standpoint, like he's really, really good at this. And so for me, even in 2 months, it's been eye-opening to see how he kind of goes about it, how he approaches television and how he is on television, which is a skill and he's very good at. So that's been great. I've had more red vines being next to Taylor than I have in years past. He loves his red vines. And I think he's going to take some time off from being a professional golfer to come work with us in Nashville, because I feel like he's been playing in more golf tournaments the past couple of weeks than calling soccer games.
Alive and well on Twitter with the golf.
Yes, he is. Sure. Yes, he is. Yeah.
We needed him last night doing his "What are we doing?" rant.
Yeah. That's that GIF or GIF, whichever one you want to call it. That'll live forever. And Atlanta supporters, go ahead and use it. Right.
All day. So now that you've kind of gotten involved, y'all, I think everybody's kind of settling in, all of the Apple TV MLS announcers. Yeah. But you mentioned, because you've been around it for so long, you kind of took a break. But what has kind of surprised you so far about the league, really I guess maybe the past couple of years, but especially since you really took over doing the national broadcast and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think the progression of the league has been remarkable, and it's been quicker than I would have expected. Again, I go back to growing up in Chicago, going to games at the original Soldier Field before it was renovated, and then to Naperville, to a D3 high school or D3 college football stadium in Naperville to watch them play, then back to the renovated Soldier Field, and then to Bridgeview. And even when I was working on those ESPN games when I was in college, and we were going to places like Spartan Stadium in San Jose and Robertson Stadium in Houston and Rice Eccles when RSL came into the league, and RFK right in DC, I wouldn't have expected that as quickly as it did, the league would grow up and mature in such a significant way. I think it started when Toronto came into the league, and certainly accelerated when Seattle and Portland came into the league, and showing what a downtown stadium can do, and a team that can be really relevant in their cities. I think those three teams, Toronto, Seattle, and Portland, were the first to kind of be that way. And then Atlanta comes in 2015, and I think sets the bar of how early success can be had for an expansion team, both on and off the field. Off the field's easier, right? Seattle, Portland, again, Toronto, they had that off the field to start. But on the field, sorry, 2000. When Atlanta came in, I said 2015, didn't I? They're not Orlando or New York City. Yeah. 2017. So when they came in 2017, they set that bar for what a team can do on the field as well. Obviously, it's well documented. The fan support in Mercedes-Benz and Bobby Dodd before that was probably even higher than anybody expected, even in Atlanta. But to me, the bar was set with on the field success, winning MLS Cup in year 2, and LAFC, kind of built off that, right? The following year when they came in. So to me, like that growth as quick as it was surprising. I wouldn't have thought, and I've said this a lot when talking about the context of my job with the Timbers for the past 8 years, I wouldn't have thought back in 2005 and 6 when I was going to Rice Eccles and RFK that a place like Providence Park could exist in 2011 when they came into the league, right? I thought that would be 20, 30 years down the road. I'd say the same thing about Atlanta United. Like, I think we always envisioned, okay, MLS can get to be maybe never where the NFL will be. I mean, that's a super high bar, but can be filling up these big stadiums with 40, 50,000 people. And to think that Atlanta was able to do that in 2017 was, for me, quite remarkable. I would have thought you're talking 220, 40, right? Maybe for MLS teams to be able to do that. So yeah, it's remarkable. The league keeps getting better. Obviously the quality on the field is better. The incoming and outgoing transfers are, show that, right. And Atlanta has been probably the leader when it comes to, Almiron, I think, changed how everybody in the league views what the league can be, bringing a young player in and then selling him for a lot of money and having success with that player when they're here, selling him for a ton of money, and hopefully that player continuing to have success, which just shows better on the league. So it's been remarkable, I think, and I'm happy to be along for the ride, but it all happened, I think, quicker than I would have told you it would have happened 15 years ago.
Yeah. And that, from the Southern standpoint, obviously Atlanta, but now Charlotte, now Nashville. I mean, it just has
it's wild,
really
right? In SEC country for MLS
FBC, ACC,
to be as successful as it is wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty incredible. And I'm kind of like you. I would have imagined it myself. I know there's some national writers who would have imagined it either, but now here we are. And pretty incredible. And I would hope only up from here. So kind of talking about Nashville, and no, you and Taylor were there, I believe, the other day against LAFC. But just from a standpoint of where they are, kind of lining up with Atlanta off the field from a contract standpoint, obviously Walker Zimmerman, who is probably one of the top center backs in the league, along there with Miles Robinson, obviously on a DP contract, obviously locked in with them for the next several years as he's kind of established himself again as one of the best at his position. Then you have Miles Robinson, who is another best 11 center back who is out of contract after this season. I guess, what are your thoughts about players like center backs getting designated player contracts, and should Atlanta do the same for Miles Robinson to keep him in the fold?
I have to be careful how I answer this question, because one of my close friends and former broadcast partner with the Timbers is Liam Ridgewell, who famously was a designated player center back who led the Timbers to the 2015 MLS Cup. I think it depends on the club, right? If you're Atlanta, there's expectations for how you're going to use your 3 designated player slots. And those expectations are on players like Thiago Almada and Miguel Almiron and Joseph Martinez, players in the attack that are going to have that kind of impact. But that's not necessarily the right way for every team to build a roster. And I think that's what makes MLS interesting, is there's different ways to build a roster and different ways to have success. I'm sure Nashville feels that Walker Zimmerman is worth it and then some for the stability that he's brought, the ability that he's brought, but he is such an important part of that back line that has been so good statistically since they entered the league, just behind Philadelphia, as far as goals allowed and all of that, which for a team, we're only talking 4 years, right? They were an expansion team and they were so good defensively. They're the best in the league right now, entering this game as far as goals allowed so far, the fewest in the league, just 5 this year. So for me, for what Nashville is and how they've built their roster and what they want to be, it's absolutely worth it. For Atlanta, does it make sense? That's a question for Garth ultimately, right? And I think it's a more difficult one, because you don't want to lose Miles Robinson, right? If you can't, and if he wants to stay, I mean, there's right, like if he wants to go to Europe and that's on the table, that's a totally different story. And I think you support the player like him at the stage of his career to do that for sure. But if you're talking just specifically from an Atlanta perspective, you don't want to lose him. But then again, if you're Atlanta United, how do you use your designated player slots? I think you probably are going to always use all three of them in the attack, right? And you want to get a lot out of those guys, a lot, right? There's high expectations.
Yeah, and just real quick, I mean, you mentioned there's so many ways to build a roster in MLS. I remember Jim Curtin was saying a few weeks ago, leading up to Philly LAFC in the Champions League, here's Philly, kind of this blue collar built through the academy, and then here's LAFC. You have Vela, you have Blanca, you had Bale last year. So yeah, absolutely right. Several ways to build a roster. I find there's not one right way to do it, but I guess that's the beauty of MLS, isn't it?
I think so. I think that's why the league is so interesting. Look, I've always been one whose sporting interests have to do with places I have a connection to. So growing up in Chicago, as I said, it was the Fire, it was the Bears, it was the Cubs, it was the Bulls. The Cubs were terrible, but I wasn't going to be a Yankees fan or a Braves fan, right? Just because in the 90s, the Cubs were bad and the Braves were amazing. They stole Greg Maddux from me. I was devastated as a kid, right? But I was a Cubs fan, right? Didn't matter if they were good or bad, didn't matter. For me, I've always viewed soccer that same way. The Fire, when I was 12 and they came into the league, that was my team, and the U.S. national team was my team, and MLS is my league. And so for me, I love MLS. Part of it is that it's interesting. I enjoy the parody, and if it's manufactured, then it is. I don't mind it. Can the league open up spending a little bit? Absolutely, right? To make it, I think that's important. I think it's going to happen to grow and to continue to raise the level of play on the field. But I do hope there is always that ability for teams to build rosters differently, because look, in the European leagues, there's not really, right? It's just spend the most money and you will win. Like that in the big leagues in Europe, that's it. And it's great. The quality of play is the best in the world in the Premier League, right? But ultimately, Manchester City spends the most money. Manchester City, especially after yesterday, are going to win the league, right? Yeah. And so
Chelsea something to say about that.
Right. Okay, you've got to get it right for sure. Yeah, but Leicester was the one in literally 40-year, 30-year exception. Yeah. And that was great. And it was an amazing year. But that's not normal. That isn't going to happen frequently. It's going to be one of the teams that spends the most money. Obviously, you can spend money wrong as you see it, and that's the case in any sport. But it's going to be one of the teams that spends the most money. And I hope that MLS, as it continues to open up and spend more money, which it needs to do, I hope that it still finds a way to not lose that ability to build teams in different ways and still be contenders, which to me makes the league very interesting.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, whether you want to call it manufactured parody or not, it is what it is. It keeps things interesting no matter what, right? You're typically going to have, at any given time, at least one player on the field who's going to be able to make a big, big difference. And that's just the way it is. And looking forward to Saturday, you've got Hani Mukhtar, you've got Thiago Almada, possibly Yorgos Giacomakis for Atlanta, but then you have Walker Zimmerman. So there's lots of factors. But in terms of Mukhtar and Almada, how does in I guess your preparation, everything that you've seen, how do each team prepare for each of those players?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked to both teams today about the other player, and both, of course, the managers and the players are going to be effusive about the counterparts. Mukhtar's an interesting one. He, is not necessarily like a traditional number 10, like Thiago is closer to. They've been playing him as a second striker. I assume it'll be with Teal Bunbury because they just traded CJ Sapong. He thrives in those areas around the box. He thrives in moments. He's a player who steps up when the team needs him. And guys like that, I was around Diego Valeri for years in Portland, and they're different players, but they remind me in that way of Valeri wouldn't necessarily boss games like you'd expect kind of an Argentinian number 10 to do, but he took a big moment better than anybody in the league for his 6 to 8 years. Like, he would finish the opportunities when his team needed to. He would score wonderful goals, and he was just kind of always there. Mukhtar is that same way. Almada is kind of the number 10, right? And we talked to Pineda about him before the Charlotte game. So this is now 6-7 weeks ago. And what he told us was he wants Thiago to be, even at his young age, like a Lucas Elarayan, like a Nicolas Ladero, a player who wants to always be on the ball and be dominating a game and just like have that desire. It's all going through me. I'm the man. And he like that. Yes, it seems like, okay, yeah, you're the only current winner of an MLS or of a World Cup in MLS ever. Like, it should be easy for you to have that attitude, but not when you're a young player, right? It's still, so he was trying to empower him to do that. We followed up with Gonzalo about it today. He thought that he was doing that and then went away for the international break, a little injury. So it's been kind of just jointed since then. Wants him to get back to that. But so they're different players, right? For Nashville, I think, but both, for Nashville with Almada and with Atlanta with Mukhtar, you just got to be aware where they are at all times. I think Nashville probably learned about giving the best player on the field too much time and too much space in the midfield last week against LAFC when they let Bouanga just right after Zimmerman came out of the game. So maybe they're a little disorganized. Let Bouanga just carry the ball 40 yards straight up the middle and just bang it from 25 yards out. Like, you can't let a player like that, the best player on the field, have that kind of time and space. It's going to be the same thing with Almada. And Almada and Bouanga are very different players. But if Almada is able to run free like that throughout the midfield, Nashville's going to be in trouble. So I'm sure they learn from that.
Yeah. So a team like Nashville, who have kind of established themselves as a consistent playoff contender, but haven't really gotten over the hump in the postseason, what switch kind of needs to flip for them to finally get over that hump? Like we talked about Hanny Mukhtar, and it seems like outside of him, Nashville don't really get a lot of scoring. So
no.
I guess
they don't.
what kind of needs to happen for them to take that next step, I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing. Mukhtar had 23 goals last year, Golden Boot, next highest scorer on the team. CJ Sapong, Teal Bumber each had 5. Like, that's a huge gap. Gary Smith was open talking to us the past couple of weeks that they need more out of their number 9 position. The CJ Sapong trade was interesting because they had Sapong and they had Bunbury, and those were really their options at the 9. And they trade Sapong for Lucas McNaughton. They clearly felt, and we talked to Gary about this today, that their center back depth issues were more important right now. They needed to get another center back in. They signed Nick DePuy, or traded for Nick DePuy with the Galaxy over the offseason. He showed up injured. Had to have Achilles surgery on one Achilles. He's having his other Achilles done like in the next couple of weeks. Gary Smith, he would only leave it at this, but he confirmed that they were not aware of those injuries when they traded for him. You can take, you can go off that, what you think, but he's clearly not happy about that situation. So they were planning on Nick DePuy. They traded Dave Romney because they were planning on Nick DePuy being there. And maybe that's not necessarily like for like, but they wanted the GAM, right, that came from trading Romney and then having DePuy there. So now they have Jack Mayer, who's a young player who's been starting with Walker Zimmerman. They just gave an MLS debut to Josh Bauer, who's a former Atlanta United 2 guy, last week when Zimmerman came out. So there's depth issues there. So they bring in McNaughton from Toronto instead of Sapong. I'm going with that is, so now it's Bunbury's, like the Bunbury and Ethan Zubak are kind of the number 9s on the roster. Do they try to go with maybe a false 9 or a different type of a 9? If when Randall Leal comes back, do they just kind of go with a more fluid front 3 or front 4 with a Pico and a Schaffelberg and a Leal and a Mukhtar and no traditional kind of bigger hold up 9, which they haven't done before? I don't know, but they need to figure that out. I think Gary Smith has been open about it. And to answer your original question, Sydney, I think it's a number 9. Like, that's how they take the next step, is a 15 to 20 goals a year goal scorer. Ake Loba did not work out. And that, when you're a team like Nashville and you construct your roster in that way, and it's any team in the league, if you miss on your big signing in this league, it's going to be difficult to right. And they missed on Ake Loba. I think it's fair to say at this point, at least they will think so. They didn't play him much. They never started him, and then they sent him on loan. So yeah, if they can find a 9, maybe it's the summer, maybe it's the off season, that can give them 15 goals a year, then I think they could take that next step. Yeah. And that's what that's not to say that they can't have success and they can't make a playoff run. And I think, like you said, they're going to be a consistent contender. And when you're hard to score on, especially in the playoffs, you can go far. But to be like a supporter shield contender, I think it's a 9.
Yeah. And you never know what can happen, right? Like you said, we always hear the old proverb, defenses win championships, right? Well, maybe not as much in soccer, but to a degree. I mean, you keep a clean sheet and you can't be beaten. So,
sure.
I
agree with you though. I mean, you look at who, who's won MLS Cup. Last year was LAFC Philly, those two teams. I know Philly's known for their defense, but last year they scored a ton of goals, right? So I know they don't have the names that an LAFC or an Atlanta do in the attack, but their attacking as a team is wonderful. New York City the year before that, Columbus, right? I mean, these Seattle, you guys, Atlanta, right? Seattle, Toronto, Portland. I mean, these teams are all good all around, but it's not the kind of Greece winning the Euros. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's teams that have attacking talent and attacking firepower.
So, all right, we've kept you for a while. We want to be considerate of your time. We know you're busy getting ready for the game and everything. Final question.
Okay.
Because Nashville is close, I guess you can consider this a derby if you want to.
What do you guys think? I'm curious. I've been polling everybody I talked to in Atlanta. Who is Atlanta United's rival? Like, how do you rank it, and who fires you up?
I'll give you mine.
Okay.
Nashville, because they just have had the issues since they came into the league. That was where Joseph got hurt back, when his ACL happened, and the fan base just tend to not like each other. Orlando feels manufactured sometimes because Atlanta was so dominant for so long.
Right.
And Charlotte just isn't old enough, I think, yet. We always try to throw out the names, and we had a good one, the Crown and Coke Derby earlier this year for that one, for the Crown City and Coca-Cola. But I think in terms of just teams not liking each other, at least in the Southeast, to me, it's Nashville so far.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually talking about it on the Twitter space with someone a few minutes ago, or a few hours ago, I should say. I think the one thing that kind of threw a wrench into things was when Nashville were in the Western Conference during COVID. That kind of threw a wrench into things. They didn't play each other twice every year, but now with them both in the same conference again, playing each other home and away in the return fixture, I think that kind of kicks up the rivalry thing. As Tyler was saying, every time these teams play, it seems like there's something that happens. And I was talking to Walker Zimmerman about this last year after this match that got delayed for
3 hours,
2.5 hours, something like that, to a lightning delay. I was asking about it. They said, I mean, it seems like every time these teams play each other, there's some weird twist or something like that happens. So, I think proximity-wise and considering the matches that these teams have played, I think it's fair to consider this a true out-and-out derby. And from my vantage point, I don't expect anything different on Saturday than has occurred between these two sides in the past. I mean, what do you think?
I hope so. I hope it is. It's interesting. I feel like every Atlanta person I talk to has a different answer, which is really interesting. Some I feel like have hold on to Orlando, right? And love the fact that Atlanta had so much success against Orlando, and still do really love that fact. I was on with Jason Longshore earlier today. He threw out the Red Bulls.
Red Bulls is a big one.
As a big one, and Toronto even, and Orlando before Nashville or Charlotte. So it's interesting. I think Nashville's still relatively new, and you mentioned the pandemic. Charlotte's super new, so I hope that proximity wins in the long run, because I think that just makes for better rivalries. But Orlando's going to have Miami there, right? So are they kind of pulled away? I as being in Cascadia, right? I don't love the kind of three-way thing, because I think Vancouver always feels like kind of the stepchild. And Portland and Seattle are this.
Absolutely.
And Vancouver is there. And it's half of it. And we're all kind of cool. Everybody's kind of cool with Vancouver, right? But I'm sure Vancouver's no, we want to be somebody's rival, right? And they are, but so that's why I think one rival, LAFC is perfect, right? So having one primary rival in the long term makes those games extra special. Maybe I hope it becomes Nashville. I think that's a good one. I think Nashville's back in the East. It was interesting talking to Gary Smith about it last week. It was LAFC. It was a Western Conference opponent. And he was like, they were not happy playing in the West.
Yeah.
There was so much travel last year. They did not like it. They did not like going back and forth. And they were like, we started to figure out the East. They put us in the West to begin the whole thing. And we were there for 2 weeks. And then COVID happened. They bring us to the East for that rest of that season, unbalanced, conferences. They stay in the East for 2021, 2022. They're back West. And he's like, we just gotten to know all the Eastern Conference teams, and they got to know us. And then they put us in the West, and we're traveling way more than any other team in the league because we're so far from everything. And they did all right, clearly, which says a lot about them. But they were really happy to be back in the East, and they'll stay there. And yeah, hopefully it's a good rivalry. We love that. I hope there's a little, like you're talking about, stuff happening. I hope stuff happens because it makes our broadcast interesting.
Well, and you talk about Jason, and we've talked about that a lot. But the Red Bulls, you talking about stuff happening. The Red Bulls, that was the rivalry in terms of. Every time they met each other on the pitch, it was always something. There was fights, arguments. There was if the camera was close enough, or if you were near the field, you could hear the cussing and screaming and everything. And there was always cards being thrown, and some of the best matches we've ever seen. And thankfully, Atlanta finally got over that hump of beating them in the regular season this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Red Bulls is good. But in terms of I guess local, quote unquote, Nashville's 4 hours away from Atlanta. Yeah. Both teams have fans that travel well, so it just seems natural. I think so.
Love it.
It'll be fun.
Let's go.
Cool. So you'll be there Saturday.
We'll be there.
Or do you have any plans on anywhere you're going to hit in Nashville while you're there?
Man, so I'm going to be in Nashville for 20 hours. Literally, I land. It's an early game, right? So I'm landing at 9 p.m. and I'm out at 5:30 after the game. I've got a family event obligation I've got to be at on Sunday. So I am not in town long enough. But we're back there, and Nashville's a wild place. It's a party town.
Yeah.
My other former Timbers broadcast partner, Ross Smith, who's part of our MLS Season Pass crew. Ross lives in Nashville now. And so with his wife, who works for Nashville SC. So they're very, very, very close friends with both of them. So we had a wonderful trip to Nashville last summer where they took us around the town. It was July 4th weekend. Broadway is crazy, crazy. Yeah, it's like Vegas with cowboy hats. And man, it was great. We went to other places as well, listening to live music. So this trip, unfortunately, won't have any of that, but we've got at least 2 more on the schedule over the next month or 2. So plenty of time to enjoy Nashville and have some hot chicken. Man, they delivered us some hot Nashville hot chicken from the stadium in the booth last week. And there was a medium and a spicy, and I took a bite of the spicy 10 minutes before we were going on the air, and almost didn't recover in time for the show to start. It was
that Nashville spicy chicken. That's like when you go to a Thai restaurant.
Exactly. And Taylor's making fun of me because he's like, "Oh, you can't handle it." He didn't have a bite. Halftime, he has a bite of the medium. And he can't even handle that. And he's freaking out. I think you mentioned it on the air in the first 5 minutes of the second half. He was still trying to figure out which team was in which jersey because it was it was the One Planet kits last week. Yeah. So he's the first 5 minutes of the second half, he didn't know what he was watching. Yeah. So
I'll tell you this. When you get to Nashville, maybe next time when you've got more time, or when you come to Atlanta, because they have a couple here, a place called Hattie B's, if you've never heard about it.
Yeah, I know Hattie B's. I don't know if we made it last. Tried to make it last time, and I think we maybe showed up to the original one, and there was a line, and so we couldn't. It was a wait, but I'm all about that. Yeah. Hattie B's. Cool. We'll make it there. Again,
either Hattie B's or another one that escapes me. I'll remember it probably after you get off here. But it was pretty hot. Yeah, we'll hook you up on Twitter. Let's remember. Right. But
I got maybe after the game because if I do before the game, it was I could be gotta recover. Need to give myself time to recover.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, when you're in the bins, we'll come say hey to you. If you get to call a game down here, we appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great time, and by all means, you're welcome back whenever you want to come on. We'll
always happy to come on. Have me on. Awesome. We're doing a lot of Atlanta games this year. I think. We don't have a full schedule at all, but this will already be our second. We've got a couple more. Next week we're in Miami for the Joseph Derby. So, man, we're buzzing. So we'll be getting a lot of Atlanta.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, Jake. Really appreciate you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
See you.
Take care. Cheers.